The sound of a slap echoed through the marble hallway like thunder in a cathedral. Tund froze at his own front door, keys still dangling from his fingers, briefcase halfway to the floor. He had flown 14 hours from Dubai, driven 2 more from Lagos, all to surprise the woman who gave him life. But the surprise was his. Through the arched doorway of the living room, he saw her, Mama Kemi, his mother, crumpled on the imported Italian tiles, one hand pressed against her cheek, the other trembling as it reached for nothing. Above her stood Ada, his wife of 5 years, her designer heel inches from his mother's worn wrapper, her manicured finger pointed down like a sword. "You illiterate woman." Ada's voice dripped with venom. "You think because you birthed him, you own this house? You're nothing but a roadside food seller who got lucky." The 3 housemaids pressed themselves against the corridor walls, eyes wide with terror. The security guard by the window stared at his shoes. Everyone had learned that Ada's rage was a storm you didn't interrupt. But they hadn't counted on Tund. He stepped into the room with the quiet of a man who had walked into boardrooms and silenced rooms with his presence alone. 32 years old, 6 feet of controlled power in a crisp white shirt, he moved like water, smooth, inevitable, unstoppable. Ada didn't hear him. She was too busy, too consumed by whatever fury had possessed her. "Mama, please," his mother whispered, using the respectful term even as tears carved rivers down her weathered cheeks. "I only asked if you had given Tund his medicine. He texted me that his malaria? His medicine?" Ada's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Is he a child? Am I not his wife? You think I don't know how to care for my own husband?" Tund's jaw tightened, but he said nothing yet. He watched. He absorbed. He remembered every second, burning it into his memory like film. This was the woman he had trusted with his heart, with his name, with access to everything he had built. This was the woman currently raising her hand again toward the person who had sold Acura by the roadside for 12 years to pay his school fees. Time slowed. Ada's hand rose in an arc. Mama Kemi flinched, her body already knowing the impact before it landed. The maids gasped, and Tund moved. Not with violence, not with rage. He simply stepped between them, caught Ada's wrist mid-swing with the gentleness one might use to catch a falling leaf, and said one word, "Stop." Ada's head snapped around. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, then filled with something like calculation. She had been caught, yes, but she was already strategizing her defense. Tund saw it all. 5 years of marriage had taught him to read her like a quarterly report. "Tund, baby, you're home." She tried to smile, tried to pivot to charm, but her voice cracked on his name. "I didn't expect. Your mother, she's been interfering, and I help my mother up." His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that made international investors nervous in negotiations. Ada blinked. "What?" I said, "help my mother up." Now. For 3 heartbeats, Ada didn't move. Pride, shame, and fear battled across her face like weather systems. Then she looked at Mama Kemi, still on the floor, still trembling, still watching her son with eyes that held both pain and something else. Hope, perhaps, or faith that the boy she raised would know what to do. Ada's hands clenched. "Tund, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." He released her wrist and stepped past her, kneeling beside his mother with a tenderness that made the watching maids tear up. "Mama, it's me. I'm here now." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, though her body was solid from years of labor, and guided her to the velvet sofa that Ada had insisted cost more than a car. His hands checked her face, her arms, cataloging every bruise with the precision of a man taking inventory of damages. Behind him, Ada stood frozen, suddenly aware that the ground beneath her Christian Louboutins had become quicksand. The staff watched, barely breathing. This was the moment. Everyone in that room knew it. In Nigerian households, in African homes, in communities built on respect and hierarchy, this was the unforgivable sin. A wife raising her hand to her husband's mother? It was the kind of transgression that ended marriages, that got women sent back to their family compounds in disgrace, that became cautionary tales whispered at weddings. Tund should explode. He should rage. He should call her family, pack her things, and put her out before sunset. That's what tradition demanded. That's what his friends would advise. That's what the maids expected. Instead, he pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and took 3 photos of his mother's injuries. Click, click, click. The sound was somehow worse than shouting. Ada's blood turned to ice. What are you? Tund. Please, let me explain. Chioma, he called to the head maid without looking at Ada. Take my mother to the guest suite. The one with the garden view that no one uses. That's her room now. Permanently. Get Dr. Adeli here within the hour. Call him yourself. Use my name. Yes, sir. Chioma moved quickly, grateful for a task, for permission to help Mama Kemi without fearing Ada's wrath. As his mother was led away, she glanced back at her son, questions in her eyes. Tund nodded once. Trust me, the gesture said. She did. She always had. Now it was just Tund and Ada in the vast living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured lawns of the Ikoyi estate. The silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Ada opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. She provoked me, she finally whispered. Tund turned to face her fully for the first time since entering. His eyes held no anger. That's what terrified her most. There was no heat, no fury, just a cold, clear assessment, like he was seeing her truly for the first time and finding the view disappointing. Pack a bag, he said. You're leaving? She gasped, relief and panic mixing. No, Ada, you're staying. But the woman you were an hour ago? She needs to leave this room and never come back. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, and looked out at the grounds his money had built, the empire his mother's sacrifices had made possible. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made even the furniture seem to lean in and listen. Tund stood at that window for a long moment, watching the sun paint gold across the swimming pool his mother had never once used, though he'd built it for her. She preferred the small kitchen garden behind the staff quarters, where she still grew tomatoes and peppers with her own hands, refusing to let the gardeners touch her plot. Do you know what my first memory is? He asked Ada, still not turning around. She remained rooted near the sofa, mascara beginning to streak, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid of whatever was coming. I was 4 years old. Maybe my father had just left. Not died, not traveled, just left. Walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. His reflection in the window glass showed no emotion, but his hands had curled into fists in his pockets. Mama didn't cry. Not where I could see, anyway. She woke up that Wednesday at 4 in the morning, wrapped me in the only blanket we owned, and carried me on her back to the market. She had borrowed 2,000 naira from the woman next door. Do you understand how much courage that takes? To borrow money when you have no idea how you'll pay it back. Ada's voice came out small, testing. Tund, I know your mother struggled, but I didn't ask you to speak. The words were soft, but they landed like a judge's gavel. She flinched. He continued, still addressing the window, the grounds, the ghosts of his past. She bought beans, palm oil, pepper, onions. She made akara right there on the roadside, corner of Ojalegba, near the bus stop, where civil servants caught danfos to the island. I remember the heat from the oil, how it made the air shimmer. I remember thinking my mother was magic because she could make those golden balls appear from nothing. A slight smile touched his lips, sad and sweet. I was her assistant. 5 years old with a plastic cup, collecting 50 kobo, 1 naira, 5 naira from customers. Some days we made 300 naira. Some days we made 80. On bad days, maybe 40, and she'd still find a way to buy me a sausage roll and tell me it was a feast. He turned then, finally facing Ada, and she saw something in his expression that made her stomach drop. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment, which somehow cut deeper. She did that for 12 years. 12 years of waking at 4 a.m. rain or shine, sick or healthy. When I had malaria, the real kind, not the mild case I texted about yesterday, she carried me on her back while frying akara. Customers would buy extra just to help. That's the kind of woman she is. People who have nothing themselves would give her something because they recognized goodness. The room felt smaller now, the expensive art on the walls suddenly garish, the designer furniture cold and lifeless. Ada wrapped her arms around herself, but Tund wasn't finished. I got into King's College on scholarship. Full scholarship, but it didn't cover books, uniforms, transport, food. Do you know what she did? He didn't wait for an answer. She expanded. Started selling akara in the morning, switched to pepper soup and nkwobi in the evenings. Same spot, different hours. She slept 4 hours a night for 6 years. For hours. I timed it once when I was 14. I begged her to let me drop out, get a job, help her. You know what she said? His voice cracked for the first time, just slightly, just enough to show the emotion beneath the control. Tund, my son, you are my investment. You are my future. When you succeed, I succeed. Don't worry about today. God is watching. Ada's tears were flowing freely now, but not from self-pity, from the slowly dawning realization of what she had done, who she had struck. I got into university. University of Lagos. Computer science. Again, scholarship, but never enough. She added weekend catering. She would cook jollof rice and fried rice in massive pots, deliver them to parties herself on Okada, come home at midnight smelling like smoke and spices, and still wake at 4 for the morning acro run. Tund walked slowly across the room, not toward Ada, but to the fireplace where a photo hung, him in his graduation gown, Mama Kimmy beside him in the one good dress she owned, her smile so wide it could light cities. The day I graduated, she brought me fried rice in a cooler. Made it herself that morning before the ceremony. Best rice I've ever eaten, before or since. She said, Tund, you did it. We did it. Now you go and do great things, and remember where you came from. He touched the frame gently. I got a job at a bank. Started coding on the side. Built an app that a foreign company bought for 20 million naira. She cried for 3 days when I told her. Not because of the money, because she thought she could finally rest. But you know what she did with the money I gave her? Ada shook her head, unable to speak. She opened a proper restaurant. Small, clean, called it Kimmy's Kitchen. Said she couldn't just sit down, that she needed purpose. The woman who had every right to retire at 55 kept working because feeding people was who she was. That's character, Ada. That's integrity. His next venture had been bigger, a fintech platform that revolutionized mobile payments in West Africa. The company went international within 3 years. Forbes Africa featured him at 29. He made his first billion by 30. Through it all, Mama Kimmy ran her restaurant, refused to move into the mansion until he literally carried her belongings there himself. And even then, she insisted on cooking for the staff, treating them like family, learning their names, their stories, their struggles. She's the reason this house has a heart, Tund said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The maids don't just work here. They feel valued because she remembers their children's names, asks about their sick relatives, slips them extra money when she knows they're struggling. The gardener's son is in secondary school because she's paying his fees. The driver's daughter got married last year, and Mama provided half the wedding costs. That's who she is. He finally looked directly at Ada, and she had to look away from the intensity. So when I walked in today and saw her on the floor, saw the bruises, heard you call her illiterate like it's an insult, his voice hardened. I realized I've failed. Not in business, not in wealth, but in choosing a partner who understands the difference between price and value. Ada's legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa, her whole body shaking. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry, Tund. I don't know what came over me. The stress, the pressure of maintaining everything. Your mother kept suggesting I was doing things wrong, and I snapped. It was horrible. I know it was horrible. Sorry doesn't unbruise her face, Ada. Sorry doesn't erase the terror I saw in her eyes. My mother, who faced down poverty, abandonment, and 12 years of backbreaking labor without complaint, was afraid in her own son's house. That's what sorry has to fix. And I don't think you understand the size of that debt yet. He moved to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. You want to know what true wealth is? It's not the cars in that garage or the zeros in my account. It's knowing that the woman who made me is safe, honored, and loved. Today you showed me we're bankrupt in the ways that matter most. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Ada remained on the sofa, collapsed under the weight of her actions and his words, understanding for the first time that she hadn't just hit an old woman. She had struck at the very foundation of everything Tund valued. In the distance, they could hear Dr. Adalik's car pulling up the drive. Tund straightened his shoulders, preparing to return to his mother, to be the son she deserved. Behind him, Ada wept, not yet from true remorse, perhaps, but from the shocking realization that she had shattered something she hadn't known could break. And outside the window, the sun continued its slow descent, indifferent to human drama, patient, as always, waiting to see whether the coming darkness would bring transformation or merely more shadows. Dr. Adelik's examination took 30 minutes, during which Ada sat alone in the living room like a defendant awaiting verdict. She could hear the murmur of voices from the guest suite, Tun's low rumble, the doctor's professional tone, occasional soft responses from Mama Kemi. Each sound was a reminder, a rebuke, a mirror forcing her to see herself. When had she become this person? The question circled her mind like a vulture. She stood, needing movement, needing distraction from her own thoughts. Her reflection caught in the massive gilt mirror Tund had bought from an auction in Paris. Her choice, her insistence that they needed statement pieces. The woman staring back wore a 60,000 naira wig, a designer dress that cost more than some people's annual salary, jewelry that could fund a small business. When had these things stopped being blessings and become rights? She remembered the beginning with painful clarity now, the memories rushing back like accusers taking the stand. 7 years ago, she had been Ada Okonkwo, a 160-level mass communication student at the University of Lagos, running a small makeup business from her hostel room to supplement the pocket money her struggling parents could barely afford. She had met Tund at a campus tech conference where he was the keynote speaker. Already successful at 27, but still humble enough to stay after and talk to students about their dreams. He had noticed her, not because of her beauty, though she had always been pretty, but because she asked intelligent questions about digital marketing and startup funding. They had talked for 2 hours at a nearby bookka, sharing fried rice and chicken while discussing everything from algorithms to Nollywood. She remembered how his eyes lit up when he spoke about his mother, how naturally he credited every achievement to her sacrifices. It should have been a warning, she thought bitterly now. Not a warning to avoid him, but a warning to understand what she was entering. A bond so deep that there would always be 3 people in the marriage, Tund, Ada, and Mama Kemi's legacy. Their courtship had been sweet, surprisingly normal despite his growing wealth. He took her to beach cleanups and tech meetups, not just expensive restaurants. He met her parents in their modest flat in Surulere and treated them with genuine respect, not the condescension wealthy men sometimes showed to those beneath their class. Her father, a retired teacher, had approved. Her mother had cried with joy. When Tund proposed, 2 years into their relationship, he did it simply, at Mama Kemi's restaurant, with both their families present, over a meal his mother had cooked herself. The ring was stunning, yes, but the moment was about family, about merging lives and honoring roots. Ada had loved that. She truly had. The woman who said yes that evening had understood what mattered. So what happened? The wedding was the turning point, she could see now. Tund had wanted something modest, meaningful. But Ada's friends, women she had known from university who had married into money or wealth themselves, had filled her head with expectations. You're marrying a billionaire, Ada. You can't have a small wedding. People will think he's cheap or that he doesn't value you. The pressure had mounted. Magazine features, event planners, sponsors wanting to associate with Tund's brand. The wedding became a 3-day spectacle that cost 200 million naira, even though Tund had suggested they spend a fraction of that and donate the rest to charity. Ada had insisted. She had won. But looking back, she realized she had lost something in that victory, the part of herself that understood the difference between celebration and showmanship. Marriage to a billionaire came with access to a world she had only glimpsed before. Private jets, international shopping trips, exclusive parties where people wore wealth like armor. Her friends multiplied. Women who wanted to be close to Mrs. Tund Adebayo, who praised her taste, her style, her influence. Ada, you're so lucky, they would say over champagne brunches. You're living the life we all dream of. And slowly, insidiously, she began to believe that luck had chosen her rather than Tund. She became the curator of their image, the Instagram-perfect couple with the mansion and the lifestyle. Every room in the house became a set for content. Every outfit a statement. Every dinner party a performance of success. Tund had tolerated it, mostly. He was busy with expanding his business across 15 African countries, with board meetings and investor calls and charity initiatives. He trusted her to manage the home, the social calendar, the presentation of their life. That trust, she realized now, had been her rope, and she had woven it into a noose. The problems with Mama Kemi had started small, almost imperceptibly. The older woman's presence in the mansion had initially been endearing. She helped in the kitchen, chatted with staff, maintained her simple routines. But as Ada's social circle grew more elite, Mama Kimmy began to feel like an inconvenience, a reminder of origins that didn't photograph well. "Ada, why do you need 5 different china sets?" Mama Kimmy had asked once, genuinely confused. "We're only 3 people plus staff. 1 good set is enough." "Mama, you don't understand," Ada had replied, her tone already carrying the seeds of condescension. "We entertain important people. We need variety." "Important people care about dishes?" Mama Kimmy's confusion had been sincere, not judgmental, but Ada had heard criticism. She had begun to hear criticism in everything. When Mama Kimmy suggested simpler meals instead of elaborate 7-course dinners, when she questioned why Ada needed a new car when the current one was barely a year old, when she gently asked if Ada had considered charity work instead of just charity galas. The final straw, the thing that had led to today's explosion, had been so trivial that Ada felt sick remembering it. Mama Kimmy had reorganized the kitchen pantry, putting basic staples at eye level and pushing the expensive imported ingredients to higher shelves. "This way, it's easier for everyone to find what they need," she had explained to the confused chef. Ada had erupted. Not violently, not yet, but with cutting words about boundaries and respect and knowing one's place. "This is my kitchen, Mama. My house. I organize it the way I want." Tund had been in South Africa for a conference. The staff had witnessed the exchange in uncomfortable silence. And Mama Kimmy, instead of defending herself, had simply nodded and quietly retreated to her room. That moment of power had felt good. That was the terrifying truth Ada now faced. She had enjoyed putting the older woman in her place, had felt a surge of control and authority. The entitled monster had already been born. Today's violence was just its inevitable maturation. Over the following weeks, her comments had grown sharper, her tolerance thinner. She criticized how Mama Kimmy dressed for family dinners, suggested she eat in her room when certain guests visited, made it clear through 1,000 small cuts that the roadside Acra seller didn't belong in this world of marble and money. And Mama Kimmy, with heartbreaking grace, had absorbed it all. She made herself smaller, quieter, less visible. She stopped offering suggestions. She asked permission before moving through her own son's house. She became a ghost haunting the mansion Tund had built for her comfort. The staff had noticed. Chioma had even gently approached Ada once. "Madam, please, Mama Kimmy is not feeling well. She barely eats. Maybe you could mind your business and do your job," Ada had snapped. The maids had learned to stay silent, caught between loyalty to the kind woman who treated them like family and fear of the mistress who signed their paychecks. That silence, Ada understood now, had been its own form of tragedy. This morning had started with Tund's text to his mother about feeling unwell, asking if she could remind Ada to give him his malaria medication when he got home from his trip. It was innocent, habitual, a son checking in with his mother because that's what sons who love their mothers do. But Ada had seen the message on Mama Kimmy's phone, left on the kitchen counter, and something in her had snapped. The implication that Tund still needed his mother's reminders, still went to her first, still trusted her oversight. It was the final indictment of Ada's inadequacy. Not as a wife, as a human being. The confrontation had escalated from words to something worse, from disrespect to violence, and now here she stood, a woman who had traded her soul for status and found herself bankrupt in the ways that mattered. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her spiral. Tund appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. Behind him, she could see Chioma helping Mama Kimmy settle into the guest suite. "Dr. Adelik says she'll be fine physically. Bruised ribs, contusions, shock. Nothing broken, by God's grace." His voice was clinical, distant. But the emotional damage? That's deeper. That takes longer to heal. Ada opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. "No, you'll speak when I ask you to speak. Right now, you listen, and you think very carefully about whether you want to remain in this house." The ultimatum hung between them like a blade. Ada's heart hammered against her ribs, the same ribs she had bruised on the woman who had given Tund life. The irony wasn't lost on her. Neither was the justice. Tund walked to the center of the living room, positioning himself where he could see Ada clearly, where she couldn't hide in shadows or behind furniture. The evening light streamed through the windows, illuminating the space like a courtroom. Everything about his posture spoke of a man who had made boardroom decisions that affected thousands of lives, who had negotiated with governments and corporations, who understood power not as volume, but as presence. "Sit," he said, not a request. Ada sat, her hands twisting in her lap, her expensive rings suddenly feeling like shackles. He remained standing, and the difference in elevation was deliberate, symbolic. She was being judged, and they both knew it. "I'm going to tell you what happens next," Tun began, his voice carrying the measured calm of someone who had already made every decision and was simply informing the other party of conclusions reached. "You have two choices, and I'll give you exactly 60 seconds to make your selection after I explain both. Choose wisely, because there's no appeal, no negotiation, no second chance." Ada's breath came in shallow gasps. Her mind raced through possibilities: divorce, public disgrace, being sent back to her family's home in shame. In Nigerian society, in Lagos social circles, such a fall would be catastrophic. She would become a cautionary tale, the woman who had everything and destroyed it with her own hands. "Choice 1, Tun said, beginning to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "You leave. Tonight. I'll give you 20 million naira, more than generous considering the circumstances. You'll sign papers saying this marriage ended by mutual agreement, citing irreconcilable differences. I'll make sure your family is taken care of, that you're not financially destroyed. You'll leave quietly, with dignity, and we'll both move on with our lives. Your reputation takes a hit, yes, but you survive it. In 2 years, this becomes a footnote. People forget. You rebuild." He paused, letting the option settle. It was more than fair. It was merciful, even. Many men would have thrown her out with nothing, would have ensured her social destruction, would have made her an example. Ada felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the escape, the chance to restart before things got worse. But Tund wasn't finished. "Choice 2, he continued, and now his voice carried a different weight, something that made the air in the room feel thick. "You stay, but not as the woman you were this morning. That Ada is dead as of the moment my mother hit this floor. If you choose to stay, you're choosing rehabilitation, redemption, and a reckoning with who you've become." He stopped pacing and faced her directly. "Here's what that means. For the next 3 months, you will live in this house under specific conditions. You will move to the guest room on the ground floor, the small one near the kitchen that we use for short-term visitors. No access to joint accounts beyond a monthly allowance of 200,000 naira for personal needs. No driver. No personal shopper. No party invitations." Ada's eyes widened. 200,000 naira? She spent more than that on a single shopping trip, on one dinner with friends. "You will spend 4 hours every day working directly with my mother. Cooking, cleaning, gardening, whatever she needs. You will learn from her the things money cannot teach. Humility, service, gratitude. The staff will watch. They'll report to me. Any disrespect, any attitude, any hint of the woman who struck her today, and you're out immediately with nothing but the clothes on your back." The conditions landed like stones in water, each one sending ripples of reality through Ada's consciousness. This wasn't just punishment. This was transformation or destruction. There was no middle ground. "You will also," Tund continued, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its steel, "attend therapy. Twice a week. I've already contacted Dr. Nwosu, the psychologist. She specializes in entitled behavior, anger management, and moral realignment. You'll work with her to understand how you became someone capable of violence against an elderly woman who never harmed you." Ada's tears flowed freely now, but Tun's expression didn't change. Compassion, yes, he wasn't cruel. But mercy without accountability was just enabling, and he knew the difference. "If you complete the 3 months, truly complete them, with genuine change, with documented growth, with my mother's forgiveness, then we'll talk about rebuilding our marriage. Not restoring it to what it was, because that version was diseased, but building something new, something real, something worthy of the values I was raised with." He moved closer, kneeling so they were eye level, so she couldn't miss the sincerity in his face. "Ada, I loved you. Part of me still does. I married you because I saw goodness, intelligence, ambition tempered with kindness. That woman is still in there somewhere, buried under designer labels and social media validation and toxic friendships. This is your chance to excavate her, To remember who you were before wealth made you forget what matters. His hand reached out, not quite touching hers, hovering in the space between them. But make no mistake, this is not about saving our marriage. This is about saving your soul. Whether we end up together at the end is secondary to whether you end up whole. I will not spend my life with someone who dishonors my mother. I will not build a family with someone who mistakes cruelty for strength. So you have to decide right now. Do you want to be better, or do you want to be gone? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the house seemed to hold its breath, the staff frozen in distant corners, the air conditioning's hum fading into background static, the world narrowing to this moment, this choice, this crossroads. Ada looked at her husband, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the disappointment that aged him beyond his 32 years. She saw the son who had watched his mother bleed and had chosen wisdom over wrath. She saw the man she had married and barely recognized anymore, not because he had changed, but because she had stopped seeing him clearly. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. I want to stay. I want to be better. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. Tun nodded slowly, standing. Wanting is the first step. Doing is the journey. You'll start tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Mama wakes early. You'll wake with her. Chioma will show you to your new room tonight. Pack only what you need, clothes, toiletries, nothing extravagant. The rest stays in the master bedroom, locked, waiting to see if you earn your way back to it. He walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Ada. My mother doesn't know about this arrangement yet. When I tell her, and I will, tonight, I expect she'll protest. She'll say it's too harsh, that you should be forgiven freely, that this is unnecessary. That's who she is. She'll advocate for your mercy even after what you did. His voice thickened with emotion for the first time. But I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing this for you. For me, for any children we might someday have. I'm doing this because real love doesn't enable destruction. It demands growth. And if you can't understand that by the end of 3 months, then you never will, and we'll part ways. He left her there, alone with her choices and her conscience. Within minutes, Chioma appeared, professional and kind despite what she had witnessed. Madam, let me show you to your room. The walk from the master suite to the ground floor guest room felt like a descent through Dante's circles, each stair a meditation on consequences. The room was clean but simple, a single bed, a small desk, a bathroom with basic fixtures. No television, no luxuries, nothing to distract from the inner work required. Ada sat on the bed, feeling the modest mattress beneath her, so different from the California King with its memory foam and silk sheets she had grown accustomed to. Her phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from friends, probably wondering why she hadn't shown up to the spa day they had planned. A text from her personal shopper about a new Hermes bag that had arrived. An invitation to a yacht party for the weekend. All of it felt like messages from another life, from another woman, from a version of Ada that had died today on Italian marble tiles. She typed out a single message to her closest friend, Ngozi. Something happened. I need time. Don't call. I'll explain when I can. Then she turned off her phone, placed it in the desk drawer, and sat in the silence of her new reality. Downstairs, in the kitchen, the staff gathered in quiet conversation, processing the day's drama. He didn't throw her out, whispered Amara, the youngest maid. I thought for sure, Mr. Tund is a wise man. Chioma interrupted gently. He's giving her a chance to become worthy of this family. Whether she takes it or wastes it, that's for God and time to reveal. In the guest suite with the garden view, Mama Kimmy lay in bed, medicated for pain but conscious, staring at the ceiling. Tund sat beside her, holding her hand. You didn't have to do all this for me, my son, she said softly. It's not for you, Mama. It's for the principal, for the future, for making sure that everyone in this house understands that respect isn't negotiable, that love without honor is just a word, and that family, true family, is the bedrock everything else is built on. Mama Kimmy squeezed his hand, her calloused palm rough against his smooth one, evidence of their different lives, their shared values. You're a good man, Tund. Better than I dared dream when I was frying akara in the sun. I'm your man, Mama. Everything I am is because you showed me how to be. Outside the window, Lagos night fell like a curtain, the city lights sparkling like earthbound stars, indifferent and eternal. And in her small room, Ada lay awake, facing the first honest night of the rest of her life, wondering if redemption was truly possible or if she had destroyed something too precious to ever repair. The first morning came with the cruelty of all new beginnings. Too early, too real, too unforgiving. Ada's phone alarm, the only technology she had permitted herself to keep active, pierced the darkness at 5:45 a.m. For several disoriented seconds, she forgot where she was, reaching for the plush pillows of the master bedroom before her hand met the simple cotton of the guest room. Reality crashed back. She was no longer the mistress of the mansion. She was a student again, except the subject was humanity, and the teacher was the woman she had brutalized. By 6 a.m., she stood outside the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly, her designer pajamas replaced with a simple Ankara wrapper and t-shirt Chioma had provided. Inside, she could hear movement. Mama Kimmy was already awake, already working. Ada knocked softly, a gesture that would have been absurd 2 days ago. This was her house, wasn't it? But the rules had changed. Everything had changed. Come, Mama Kimmy's voice called, and Ada entered to find the older woman at the sink, washing vegetables, her movements slower than usual, careful around her bandaged ribs. The bruise on her face had deepened to purple-black, a grotesque badge of shame that made Ada's stomach turn. "Good morning, Mama," Ada whispered, the title feeling both foreign and necessary on her tongue. Mama Kimmy turned, her eyes assessing but not unkind. "Good morning, Ada. You're on time. That's good. Time is respect made visible." She gestured to the counter. "We're making breakfast for the household. 12 people total. Staff eats with family in this house. Tons rule. Everyone gets akara, pap, and bread. Simple, filling, made with love." Ada moved to the counter, her manicured nails looking ridiculous against the raw beans Mama Kimmy had set out for soaking. "I don't know how to make akara," she admitted, the confession tasting like failure. "I know," Mama Kimmy said simply. "That's why you're here. To learn what you should have learned before you became a wife. A woman who cannot feed herself cannot truly feed a family, no matter how many cooks she hires." The lesson began without ceremony. Peeling beans, grinding them into paste, mixing in peppers and onions, heating oil to the precise temperature. Ada's hands, accustomed to holding phones and champagne glasses, struggled with the physical labor. The oil splattered, burning her wrist. She yelped. "Cold water," Mama Kimmy instructed calmly, not rushing to help but pointing to the sink. "Quick, before it blisters." This is the first lesson. Cooking requires respect. The oil doesn't care about your status. It burns the careless and rewards the attentive. Ada held her wrist under the tap, tears mixing with water, and she wasn't entirely sure anymore which pain she was crying over. The days blurred into a rhythm that was both monotonous and revelatory. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the kitchen, learning to cook dishes Ada had only ever eaten. Jollof rice that didn't burn at the bottom, egusi soup with the right consistency, pounded yam that achieved the perfect smoothness. Mama Kimmy taught with patience but without coddling, correcting mistakes plainly, praising improvements sparingly. "You're adding too much water. The rice will be soggy. Start again. The vegetables need more time." Rushing doesn't mean efficiency. It means carelessness. Better. This one is better. You're learning to feel the food, not just follow instructions. 10 a.m. brought different work, laundry, which Ada had never done herself, not even in university. The washing machine existed, yes, but Mama Kimmy insisted on hand-washing certain items. "Machines are convenient," she explained, her hands working through soapy water despite her healing ribs. "But hands connect you to the work. You feel the fabric, understand its needs, learn patience." Everything is a lesson, Ada. Everything teaches if you're willing to be taught. Afternoons were spent in the garden, the small plot behind the staff quarters where Mama Kimmy grew her vegetables. Ada learned to distinguish weeds from seedlings, to water without drowning, to harvest without damaging. The sun was merciless, the work backbreaking. Her knees ached from kneeling, her back protested the bending. Designer cream couldn't prevent the calluses forming on her palms. "My hands used to be soft too," Mama Kimmy said one afternoon, holding up her own weathered palms beside Ada's developing ones. "Soft hands are lovely, but strong hands are necessary. You need both, Ada. Beauty and strength. Gentleness and resilience. That's the balance wealthy women often lose. They keep the soft, but forget the strong. The staff watched this transformation with mixed emotions. Some, like Chioma, felt quiet satisfaction, justice being served, lessons being learned. Others, like Emika the driver, felt uncomfortable, unsure whether to pity or respect Madame Ada in her diminished state. But all of them noticed the changes, subtle at first, but accumulating like interest. Ada began greeting them by name. Not the performative acknowledgement of before, but genuine recognition. She learned that Amara was saving money to open a hair salon. That Chitty, the gardener, had 3 children and was worried about his eldest daughter's school fees. That the cook, Beezy, had arthritis that flared in the rainy season but never complained because she needed the job. These were people Ada had lived among for 5 years and never truly seen. They had been functions, not humans. Furniture that happened to move and speak. Now, working beside them, eating breakfast at the same table as them per Tun's redesigned household rules, she began to understand the architecture of privilege she had constructed, walls that kept her elevated but isolated, superior but blind. Tund watched from a distance, his presence in the house minimal, but his awareness total. Chioma reported to him daily, Ada's progress, her attitude, her struggles. He read the updates without comment, his face impassive, revealing nothing of his internal calculations. Twice a week, Ada met with Dr. Nwosu, the psychologist, in a private office in Victoria Island. These sessions were archaeological excavations of the self, digging through layers of social conditioning, insecurity masked as confidence, and the toxic belief that worth was measured by external validation. Tell me about your mother, Dr. Nwosu prompted during their 3rd session. Ada hesitated, then began. Her mother had been a teacher too, like Tun's father had been before abandoning his family. But Ada's mother had also been obsessed with status, with climbing social ladders, with ensuring her daughter married well. Every childhood memory was tinged with her mother's anxieties. Stand up straight. Smile prettier. That girl's father is a commissioner. Be nice to her. We're not like those people. Ada? We're better. We must always be better. The revelation hit like lightning. Ada had spent her entire life trying to prove she belonged in rooms she was invited into, compensating for insecurities with aggression, mistaking dominance for confidence. Mama Kemi, with her roadside origins and unshakable self-possession, had threatened that entire construct. She didn't need validation. She didn't perform status. She simply was comfortable in her own skin in a way Ada had never achieved despite all her advantages. She showed you what you lack, Dr. Nwosu observed gently. Not material things, but internal peace. And instead of learning from her, you tried to diminish her to protect your own fragile sense of self. The truth was devastating and liberating in equal measure. Weeks turned to months. Ada's body transformed, leaner from physical work, stronger from repetitive labor. Her skin, previously maintained by expensive treatments, now bore the honest marks of sun and effort. She stopped checking social media, stopped caring about the parties she was missing, the friend group that had quietly excised her from their circle when she became unavailable and unexplained. One evening, 47 days into her rehabilitation, Ada was peeling vegetables beside Mama Kemi when the older woman suddenly stopped, wincing. Mama. Ada's concern was immediate, genuine. Are you okay? Your ribs, should you sit down? Let me finish this. Mama Kemi looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in her expression. You called me Mama just now, not because Tund requires it, but because you meant it. Ada paused, considering. It was true. Somewhere in the daily rhythm of working together, learning together, existing in shared space without pretense, the title had stopped being a formality and become a relationship. I did mean it, Ada said softly. I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry for everything. Sorry is a seed. Mama Kemi replied, returning to her work but with a slight smile. But only time and action make it grow into a tree. Keep watering it, Ada. Keep working. You're getting there. That night, Ada wrote in the journal Dr. Nwosu had assigned her. The entries had evolved from defensive justifications to honest reckonings to, now, something approaching hope. Today Mama smiled at my jollof rice. Said it was almost as good as hers. Then she laughed and said, almost might take another decade. But she was teasing, not mocking. There's a difference. I'm learning the difference. I'm learning that love looks like patience, correction, and second chances. I'm learning that wealth without character is just decorated poverty. I'm learning that the woman I beat is a better teacher than any of the expensive schools I attended. I'm learning. God help me. I'm actually learning. Tund read the report from Chioma that evening. Sir, there was a moment today. Madam Ada noticed Mama struggling with the washing and took over without being asked. She worked for 2 hours, didn't complain once. Afterward, she asked Mama about her childhood. They talked and laughed. Real laughter, sir. Not performing. Real. He set down the phone and stared out his office window at the Lagos skyline, the city of hustle and hope, of dreams and second chances. The 3 months were nearly complete. Soon, very soon, he would have to make the final judgment, whether Ada's transformation was genuine or simply a skilled performance born of desperation, whether redemption was possible or if some betrayals carved scars too deep for healing. The house held its breath. The staff whispered their predictions. Mama Kemi prayed, and Ada worked, one day at a time, one lesson at a time, rebuilding herself from the inside out, hoping that the woman emerging from this crucible would be worthy of the second chance she had been granted. Day 90 arrived with the quiet drama of any other sunrise, but everyone in the household knew its significance. 3 months. The deadline. The moment of judgment. Tund had returned from a week-long business trip to Nairobi the previous evening, entering the house after midnight. He had deliberately avoided the kitchen, the garden, the spaces where Ada's transformation was unfolding, wanting to make his final assessment without the bias of gradual observation. He needed to see the complete picture, not the individual brushstrokes. At 5:30 a.m., he descended the stairs silently, barefoot, moving through his own home like a ghost. The house was already stirring. He could hear water running, the soft clatter of pots, voices in quiet conversation. He paused outside the kitchen door, listening. No, Ada, you're doing it again. Mama Kemi's voice carried gentle exasperation. The pepper must be ground finer. Feel it between your fingers. If it's grainy, it's not ready. The akara will have texture problems. Like this, Mama. Ada's voice, smaller than he remembered, stripped of its former imperious tone. Better. Much better. You see? 3 months ago, you would have argued with me, told me your way was fine. Now you listen. That's the real change, not the cooking. The humility to accept correction. A pause. Then Ada spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. Mama, can I ask you something? Something I've wanted to ask for weeks, but was afraid. Fear is natural. Ask anyway. I won't bite. Not anymore, at least. A soft laugh, shared between them, the sound of ice finally melting. How did you forgive me? I see it in your eyes, in how you teach me. You've forgiven me, haven't you? Even though Ada's voice cracked. Even though I did something unforgivable. The silence that followed stretched so long that Tund almost thought they had moved to another part of the kitchen. Then Mama Kemi spoke, and her words carved themselves into the morning air like scripture. Forgiveness isn't pretending something didn't hurt, Ada. My ribs healed, but I still remember the pain. I still see your hand raised when I close my eyes sometimes. That's not something you forget. But forgiveness is deciding that your future doesn't have to be defined by your past. It's believing that people can grow, that mistakes can teach, that God's grace is bigger than our sins. Tund heard movement, footsteps, then what sounded like an embrace. I forgave you, Mama Kemi continued, because I remember being young and foolish myself. Different foolishness, yes, but foolish nonetheless. I remember the woman who chose to stay with a man who abandoned her, who was too proud to ask for help until pride nearly starved her child. We all have our moments of darkness, Ada. The question is whether we learn from them or repeat them. I've learned, Mama. I swear I've learned. I'll spend the rest of my life proving. Shoo, don't make promises to me. Make them to yourself. Make them to God. Make them to the woman you see in the mirror. That's who you have to live with every day. Tund stepped back from the door, his vision blurred with tears he hadn't expected. He walked to his study, sat in the leather chair that had witnessed 1,000 business decisions, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of the past 3 months. His phone buzzed. Dr. Nwosu, right on time. They had scheduled this call for 6 a.m., the final evaluation before his decision. Mr. Adebayo, the psychologist's professional warmth came through clearly. I'm sending you my complete assessment now, but I wanted to discuss it personally first. I'm listening, Tund said, his business voice activating automatically. In my 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen this level of genuine transformation. Ada came to me angry. At you, at your mother, at herself, though she couldn't admit that last one initially. She was defensive, entitled, convinced that circumstances had conspired against her rather than accepting that her choices had consequences. Dr. Nwosu paused, and Tund could hear papers rustling. But around week 5, something broke open. She stopped performing remorse and started experiencing it. The journal entries became honest. The sessions became productive. She did the work, Mr. Adebayo. The real, painful, unglamorous work of looking at herself clearly and not liking what she saw. Is it permanent? Tund asked the question that mattered most. Or is this just survival instinct? The woman adapting to circumstances until circumstances change. That's the million-naira question, isn't it? Dr. Nwosu's tone carried both sympathy and clinical honesty. I can't predict the future. No one can. But I can tell you that the neural pathways have been rewired, the behavioral patterns have been disrupted and replaced, and the cognitive framework has fundamentally shifted. She's not the same woman who walked into my office 12 weeks ago. A pause. Then, more softly, but Mr. Adebayo, I need to say something as a psychologist and as a woman who has worked with many couples. The question isn't just whether Ada has changed. It's whether you can trust that change. Whether you can move forward without holding this over her head like a sword. Whether you can genuinely offer a clean slate or will always see her hand raised over your mother. That's your work now, not hers. The call ended with professional pleasantries, but the words lingered like smoke. Tund sat with them, turned them over, examined them from every angle. Could he trust again? Did he want to? The house moved around him, the day beginning in earnest. Staff heading to their duties, his mother and Ada in the kitchen preparing breakfast, the gardener starting his rounds. His empire, this small domestic empire, functioning without him, which was perhaps the most important lesson of all. Nothing was indispensable except the values that held it together. At 7 a.m., the household gathered for breakfast. This was another of Tund's new rules. The whole house ate together on weekends, breaking bread across hierarchies, remembering that they were a community, not just an employment arrangement. Tund entered the dining room to find the table set, food steaming in serving dishes, and everyone waiting. Mama Kemi sat at one end, dressed in a simple but elegant Ankara outfit, her bruises faded now to yellow-green shadows. Ada stood by the kitchen door, uncertain, her eyes finding Tund's for the first time in 3 months of carefully avoided contact. She looked different, not just physically, though that was evident. Leaner, sun-touched, her hair in a simple bun instead of the elaborate wigs she had favored. But something deeper. The defensive set of her shoulders was gone. The calculating look in her eyes had softened. She looked, Tund thought with surprise, like the woman he had met 7 years ago at that university tech conference. Like Ada before she became Mrs. Tund Adebayo. "Good morning," he said to the room, his voice neutral. A chorus of greetings replied. He took his seat at the head of the table, a position he rarely occupied, preferring to sit beside his mother or mixed among the staff. But today required formality, ceremony, the weight of judgment. "Ada," he said, and she flinched slightly at her name. "Please sit." She moved to the chair at the opposite end of the table, the one she had occupied 3 months ago as mistress of the house. But then she hesitated, glanced at the empty chair beside Mama Kemi, and made a choice. She sat beside his mother, in the position of a daughter, not a queen. Tund noticed. Everyone noticed. The meal began with prayer, Mama Kemi's voice leading them in thanksgiving, her words including specific gratitude for lessons learned, grace received, and families healed. Then food was passed, plates were filled, and for several minutes, only the sounds of eating filled the space. Finally, Tund set down his fork. The table quieted immediately, every eye turning to him. 3 months ago, he began, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally to him but tempered now with something gentler. I gave Ada a choice. Leave with dignity and financial support, or stay and transform. She chose to stay. She chose the harder path, and I want to acknowledge that courage publicly. Ada's hands trembled in her lap, but she kept her eyes on him, refusing to look away from accountability. I've received reports from Chioma, from Dr. Nwosu, from Mama. I've watched from a distance, looking for performance, for manipulation, for the moment the mask would slip. He paused, let the tension build. I didn't find it. What I found instead was a woman willing to be broken down and rebuilt. A woman who could have gone through the motions, but chose genuine change. A woman who learned that service isn't beneath anyone, but is, in fact, the foundation of leadership. Mama Kimmy reached over, took Ada's hand. The gesture said everything. But, Tund continued, and the word landed like a gavel. Change proven over 3 months needs to be sustained over 3 years, 3 decades, a lifetime. This isn't a graduation. It's a checkpoint. The real test is what happens when the structure is removed, when no one is watching, when old temptations resurface. He stood, walked around the table slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. So here's what happens next. Ada, you may return to our bedroom. You may resume your position as my wife, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Your allowance is restored. Your access is restored. Your title is restored. Ada's breath caught, hope and fear mixing in her expression. But, Tund said, stopping beside her chair, we're not going back to what was. That marriage is dead. We're building something new, and it requires new foundations. Once a month, you will spend a full day working with Mama, cooking, cleaning, serving, not as punishment, but as remembrance, as a reminder of lessons learned and humility maintained. He looked at the staff. Everyone in this house will be treated with respect, addressed by name, valued for their humanity, not just their function. Any reports of the old Ada returning, and we revisit this conversation with much less grace. Finally, he knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her level, his eyes searching hers. Can you do this, Ada? Can you be the woman you've become for the rest of our lives? Can you honor my mother, honor this household, honor the vows we made when we were both different people? Tears streamed down Ada's face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I can't promise perfection, Tund. I'll make mistakes. I'll have bad days. But I can promise effort. I can promise consciousness. I can promise that I'll never forget what I did, what I learned, and what I almost lost. She turned to Mama Kimmy, took both the older woman's hands in hers. Mama, I know sorry isn't enough. I know forgiveness is a gift I don't deserve. But I promise you, on everything I am and hope to become, I will spend my life honoring you. Not because Tund requires it, because you taught me what love actually looks like. Mama Kimmy pulled her close, and Ada collapsed into the embrace, sobbing now with the release of 3 months of tension, fear, and transformation. The staff looked away, giving privacy to the moment, but several were wiping their own eyes. Chioma smiled through tears. Even Emeka, stoic Emeka, had to clear his throat roughly. Tund returned to his seat, allowing them their moment. When Ada finally pulled back, mascara-less and raw, Mama Kimmy cupped her face gently. Welcome home, my daughter. Not my son's wife, my daughter. That's who you are now. Family. True family. The breakfast continued, but the weight had lifted. Conversation flowed, laughter even, gentle and healing. Plans were made for the day, for the week, for the future. Ada asked Amara about her salon plans, offered genuinely to help with startup advice. She listened to Chitty talk about his daughter's school challenges and promised to look into scholarship opportunities. She was present, engaged, real in a way she had never been in this house before. As the meal concluded and people dispersed to their duties, Tund caught Ada's arm gently. One more thing, he said quietly, leading her to his study. Once inside, he pulled out a small box from his desk drawer. I bought this 6 months ago, before everything happened. It was going to be your anniversary gift. 5 years, the wood anniversary, though I went with metal instead. He opened it to reveal a simple silver bracelet, elegantly crafted but understated. On it, engraved in tiny script, were words in Yoruba, Iwa. Character is beauty, Ada translated, her voice barely a whisper. I bought it because I wanted you to remember that truth. Then I locked it away because I thought you'd forgotten it entirely. But now, he took it from the box, fastened it around her wrist. Now I think you understand it better than I do. Wear it. Remember it. Teach it to our children someday, if we're blessed with them. Ada touched the bracelet like it was made of starlight, precious and fragile. Our children, she repeated. You still see a future? I see a possibility of a future, Tund corrected gently. I see a woman who did the work, who faced her demons, who chose growth over comfort. That's the woman I married, even if we both forgot her for a while. Let's see if we can keep finding her every day for the rest of our lives." They stood there in the morning light streaming through the study windows, two people rebuilding a bridge that had nearly burned completely, laying each plank with care and intention and hope. Outside, Lagos roared with its usual chaos, traffic and hustle, dreams and disappointments, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. But in this mansion in Ikoyi, in this house built on wealth but almost destroyed by its abuse, something quieter but no less powerful was happening. A family was healing. A woman was becoming. A mother was forgiving. And a man was learning that true strength isn't just building empires. It's building character, demanding accountability, and offering grace when grace is earned. The story could have ended in violence, in divorce, in public scandal. Instead, it ended in transformation, in the quiet revolution of a single life changed and a household restored. Not perfect, not without scars, but moving forward, together, one day at a time. That evening, as the sun set over Lagos, Ada and Mama Kemi sat in the garden, tending the vegetables that Ada had learned to nurture. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when words are no longer necessary to communicate understanding. Tund watched from the balcony, his phone in hand, a message from his business partner in Accra waiting for response. But for once, business could wait. This moment, this quiet, ordinary, miraculous moment, deserved his full attention. His mother and his wife, working side by side. Not mistress and servant, not victim and abuser, but two women connected by trial and choice and the slow, patient work of building something real from the rubble of something broken. He smiled, picked up his phone, and instead of responding to business, he texted his brother in London. "Bring your family for Christmas. We have much to celebrate. And Mama's cooking has gotten even better. She has a new assistant." Below, in the garden, Ada looked up at the mansion she had once ruled like a tyrant and now inhabited like a student. The journey from queen to servant to daughter had been humbling, excruciating, and absolutely necessary. She caught Tund watching from the balcony. Their eyes met across the distance. She didn't wave, didn't perform. She simply smiled, small, genuine, full of gratitude, and returned to her work. And in that moment, watching his wife choose humility over pride, service over status, growth over comfort, Tund knew that they were going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. With time, with effort, with the kind of love that demands better and believes in the possibility of change. The story of the billionaire who walked in on his wife beating his mother didn't end in revenge or disgrace. It ended in redemption, in the understanding that true wealth is measured not in zeros on a bank account, but in the capacity to transform pain into wisdom, anger into growth, and broken relationships into families stronger for having been tested. Because that's what real love does. It doesn't destroy. It refines. It doesn't give up. It demands better. And it never, ever forgets that the most valuable things in life, respect, character, humility, family, can't be bought, only earned, one difficult, beautiful day at a time. Dear friend, thank you for journeying through this story with us. If Tund and Ada's experience touched your heart, if Mama Kemi's grace moved you, or if this reminded you that change is always possible when we're willing to do the work, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more stories that heal and inspire, and share this with someone who needs to hear that redemption is real. Drop a comment below telling us what lesson resonated most with you. Remember, true wealth isn't what we own, but who we honor. Character isn't built in comfort, but in the courage to face our failures and choose differently. And family, real family, is forged not in perfect moments, but in the willingness to extend grace when grace seems impossible. You are capable of growth. You are worthy of second chances. And you have the power to choose, every single day, who you will become. Stay blessed, stay humble, and keep choosing love over pride. Until next time.